About a year ago, actually it was a year ago in our May meeting, we had a group of students that spoke to the board about their concerns with respect to names on our campus. And so our board committed to taking a deep dive and looking into the names on our campus. And so we've spent the last year doing that. At our March meeting, we had a number of presentations, and Chuck Duckett and Austin Gardner brought our board and all those in attendance up to speed with what we had learned. But one thing that was clear throughout the process, and we learned this early on, is that we have a very long and rich history at Carolina, and we needed to find a comprehensive solution to dealing with our names. And so in that continuing conversation that we've had, I'll turn it over to Austin and Chuck to lead our conversation today.
Thank you, Chairman Caudle. At the meeting of the University Affairs Committee last May, we were presented with a petition by over 800 students and faculty of religious studies geography about Saunders Hall, requesting that we change the name. Trustee Duckett and I subsequently studied the history of William L. Saunders and the original naming of the Saunders Hall. And frankly, we were troubled by what we learned and sought the input of historians and public policy experts all over the country. We learned this issue had come up at dozens of other universities and was far more complex than merely renaming a building. We then conducted over 200 meetings with students, faculty, alumni, and university leaders, both current and past. We consulted experts in history, memorials, public policy. We also met with the student leaders who subsequently asked us to place a plaque on McCorkle Place also, and to contextualize the Confederate Memorial, also known as Silent Sam. And they also asked us to create a mandatory curriculum to teach the racial history of UNC. This search for information culminated in our March 15th meeting when we heard from multiple speakers, including the leadership of the student group, the president of the Young Republicans, 4 UNC faculty, including Professor Brophy, who I believe is with us here today. Thank you for being here, and several alumni. Subsequently, Trustee Duckett and I solicited proposals from the university community at large in an online forum open to the entire community. We also conducted faculty meetings and meetings with the Dean's Council and the Chancellor's Cabinet. So just to go back, our objectives, as we stated in our March meeting, is that we wanted to be responsive to all of our constituencies, all of our students, faculty, and alumni. While we appreciate the passion and initiative of the student group, they are just one of many constituencies that we serve. In some press accounts, some student activists have questioned whether the board should even consider the opinions of others in our community. We reject the notion that any one group has a monopoly on opinions or ideas. It is our duty to be responsive to all of our community. As an institution, our primary responsibility is to teach, and that includes the history of the university. We believe that it is our responsibility for the history of UNC to be accurate, complete, and accessible to all who seek to learn about it and from it. We agree with the student activists that the university has not told the complete story of UNC's history, and we seek to rectify that. As Chairman Caudle mentioned, we took a comprehensive approach, not merely the renaming of a building, and we will address the issue of Saunders Hall today, but we will present a comprehensive solution to a more complete, accurate, and accessible understanding of our history. Not just the racial history, but also the complete history of the university. We developed a rubric for considering solutions, and we wanted to make sure that each solution that we listened to had some connection to evidence, to research. For example, we received many proposals to rename Saunders Hall for a variety of historic figures but there was little evidence to support their connection to UNC. So we rejected those solutions. In all of the solutions we considered, we wanted to ensure that the telling of our history was accurate, complete, and accessible to all. For example, we received a proposal to create a freshman seminar on the racial history of UNC. It's a great idea, but it would not serve our purposes in this effort. It would only be accessible to a very small number of students, 15 or 20 out of 18,000 undergraduates. So it didn't pass our rubric. The solutions that we gathered from the community fell in three buckets. First was about curating our historic buildings, monuments, memorials, and landscapes. The second was about teaching our community about UNC-Chapel Hill history. And the third was about the renaming of Saunders Hall specifically, but more generally the naming of other historic buildings on campus. The first resolution we'd like to introduce this morning addresses the curation of our campus buildings and the teaching of UNC history. Trustee Duckett, will you please read the first resolution?
Thank you. Resolution number 1, curating the UNC campus and teaching UNC's history. The Board of Trustees would like to ensure that students, prospective students, faculty, staff, and anyone with an interest in the university have the opportunity to learn about Carolina's history, values, and contributions to society. The Board requests that the Chancellor and her administration commission one or more task forces to 1. Create historical markers for McCorkle Place and Saunders Hall that provide an accurate, accessible, and complete history of each place. Make specific recommendations including time frame and budget for review by the University Affairs Committee and approval by the Board of Trustees no later than November 2015 meeting. Number 2, evaluate the current information we publish on our buildings, monuments, memorials, and landscapes as to its accuracy, completeness, and accessibility. Make specific recommendations for improvements, including feasibility, time frame, and budget for approval by the University Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees no later than May 2016 meeting. Number 3, study the feasibility of a public space to house a permanent collection of UNC's history. Present the findings and make specific recommendations, including time frame and tentative budget for review by the University Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees no later than May 2016 board meeting. 4th, explore options for creating an online orientation program or course for all community members, students, faculty, and staff to learn about UNC's history, values, and contributions to society. This should be a short, not for credit, free, and open to all students, faculty, staff, and alumni. Present the findings and make specific recommendations, including time frame and budget, for review by the University Affairs Committee of the Board of Trustees no later than May 2016 meeting.
So we have a motion.
Second.
I'll entertain discussion. Do we have any discussion from the board? Any comments?
Do you know who you want to be doing the curation? Who's going to be, I mean, I know you recommend conceptually, is it going to be historians from the university, or what are we thinking there?
Yes, I think Austin can answer if I don't cover this correctly, but it's going to be a combination of historians, archivists, and experts in the field.
There's a committee, a standing committee of the university, which I was not aware of, that addresses the history of the university, and they are ready, willing, and able to address the curation of our campus.
Right.
Any other questions, comments, discussion? Okay, we have a motion. I have a second. Okay, I'll call for a vote by show of hands. All in favor, raise your hand. Okay, it looks like we have a unanimous approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Caudle. The first resolution addressed the curation and teaching of UNC history. We have two additional resolutions. The second resolution deals specifically with the renaming of Saunders Hall. The third resolution will address more generally how we will deal with the renaming of historic buildings, monuments, memorials, and landscapes in the future. William L. Saunders' legacy is complex. He made significant contributions to the state of North Carolina and to UNC. He served as Secretary of State for 12 years. He worked diligently to save the colonial-era records of North Carolina, which became the basis of the North Carolina Archives in Raleigh. He served on the Board of Trustees for 17 years and 13 years as the Secretary for the Board of Trustees. You say you could do that for 13 years. You know? And it was a time-consuming job without pay. For this service to the state and to the university, the leadership of the university recommended a building be named for Mr. Saunders in 1920. In the official record of the naming of the building in 1920, the university cited Mr. Saunders' leadership of the Ku Klux Klan as one of the qualifications for the honor of having the building named for him. What you see on the screen is an official record of the university on this matter, and it identifies Mr. Saunders as the head of the Ku Klux Klan in North Carolina. And although we have no hard evidence to support his reputed leadership of the KKK, the university itself believed he was the leader of the Klan and honored him because of that belief. Therefore, we would like to offer the second resolution of our comprehensive solution. If the staff could hand out the second resolution. Okay, Trustee Duckett, will you please read the second resolution?
Yes. Resolution number 2, renaming Saunders Hall to Carolina Hall and explaining the history of Saunders. The Board of Trustees has reviewed the history of the naming of Saunders Hall for UNC alumnus and trustee William L. Saunders. We recognize and appreciate Mr. Saunders' many contributions to UNC and the state of North Carolina. However, we believe the university made an error in citing Mr. Saunders' leadership in the Ku Klux Klan during Reconstruction as a qualification for the honor. During Mr. Saunders' reputed leadership of the Klan was a violent terrorist organization that sought to overthrow a duly elected state governments and reverse rights granted to newly emancipated African Americans. Membership in and the activities of the KKK were illegal at the time, and their activities would be illegal today. Leadership of the KKK as a qualification for the honor of a building name is inconsistent with UNC's values of Lux Libertas and where we are going as an institution. Therefore, the Board of Trustees instructs the Associate Vice Chancellor for Facility Services to remove William L. Saunders' name from Saunders Hall. We further request a historical marker be placed on, in, or near the building explaining Mr. Saunders' contributions to UNC and to the state of North Carolina, the naming of the building in 1920, the historical context of the period, and the reason why the Board of Trustees has chosen to remove the name. We approve the renaming of Saunders Hall to Carolina Hall, and further request a plaque be placed on, in, or near the building with the following language. Carolina Hall. We honor and remember all of those who suffered the injustices at the hands of those who would deny them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Lux Libertas, UNC Board of Trustees, 2015.
We have a motion for resolution number 2. Any discussion, questions, clarification?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I I believe we're considering a third resolution, as
Correct.
Austin said, that deals with the renaming and how we deal with that going forward on the
Correct.
on the freeze. That I believe that's listed also on the material that's been handed.
Yes, it's, Austin said this, but I'll reiterate it. This is a comprehensive solution. We have 3 resolutions. The 3 resolutions together comprise the comprehensive solution. This is simply the second resolution, and obviously the third will come in just a second. Any?
I'd like to make a remark, if I could, Mr.
Please.
I do want to thank you, Lowry, and thanks especially to our colleagues on the board and Chuck and Austin for your efforts on this very sensitive issue. And I'm proud that as the university community has considered an issue such as this that can arouse some strong feelings, the discussions have been respectful and largely resisted overheated rhetoric that can poison dialogue rather than promote it. Several times during these discussions as a board member, I've been reminded of what my former home state Tennessean senator and senior statesman Howard Baker was fond to say, and he would advise that when you are engaged in a heated or passionate debate, do your best on occasion to think to yourself, perhaps the other side could be right. Senator Baker said this not to encourage abandonment of principles, but as a means of encouraging efforts to find common ground. This attitude of goodwill is too often missing these days, and I hope and I'm confident that our university community, as it moves ahead today after our discussions and our decisions, we will keep these words in mind. And with this in mind, I appreciate the opportunity to explain why I will vote in favor of resolution number 2 to rename Saunders Hall to Carolina Hall, and resolution number 3 on renaming and a freeze of renaming, as we will discuss. These, together with the curating and educating initiative, I believe are in the best interest of the university. This is a very difficult decision. It's very difficult for me individually, and I know a number of other board members. And the discussion in our last board meeting reflected that. This is truly a decision where reasonable and well-intended people can disagree. Many thoughtful voices have argued passionately that changing the name of Saunders Hall is an effort to rewrite history, and I am sensitive to this concern. But as a leading university, Carolina should be especially on guard to preserve our history. And by that I mean, as Austin said, our full history, not just our racial history. Preserving our history allows us not only to learn from our sometimes unpleasant and painful past, but also to celebrate progress made across the sweep of history. And I believe that the board's actions today to focus first and foremost on curating and educating will in fact strengthen the preservation of our history. By curating and educating to preserve our history, we will be reminded that the Carolina of 2015 is evidence of progress that has been made. And although progress must continue, during the social media challenge times that we live, we must also recognize that the university of today on this issue would be in many ways unrecognizable to students, faculty, and leaders as recently as 1955, much less 1875. I am sympathetic to the concerns, as in our policy, that our university must proceed very carefully in renaming buildings or monuments. In reaching my decision to support the renaming, however, I am unable to ignore the important symbolic considerations that result from the university's explicit celebration of Mr. Saunders' leadership in the Klan as a basis for naming of the building many years ago. As Chuck and Austin referenced, Mr. Saunders made significant contributions to our state and university, and these contributions, as well as the turbulent times of Reconstruction in the immediate years after the Civil War, must be recognized as part of our comprehensive approach. The curating and educating initiative must ensure that this takes place. And so while I fully respect and appreciate those who come out differently on this issue, I believe the best interests of the university are served by support of resolution number 2, along with the others in resolution number 3 that we'll be discussing, and that the explicit celebration of Mr. Saunders' reputed Klan leadership as a qualification for the honor of the building name is inconsistent with the values of UNC. I do so, again, in the context of the proposed comprehensive approach that will focus intently on the importance of preserving our history. And thanks for giving me a chance to express myself today.
Jeff, thank you. Any other comments? Phil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Trustees Gardner and Duckett for the work that went into the deep research, the consultation with members of the community to bring us to this day. I also want to express my appreciation to the students and to the faculty and others who brought the matter to our attention. We know that the issue of naming, history, and so forth have a lot of meaning, and I'm one who feels and who has felt throughout the year that we should know our history, consistent with the biblical observation that ye shall know the truth, and knowing the truth you will be free. So I'm delighted that we've gone through this process. It would have been my ordinary view that knowing the history meant that we should simply leave it in place. But the board, in naming the building for Saunders, made an error. And we have an obligation as trustees now, having discovered the error and understanding the power and the meaning of the error, to in fact correct it. So for that reason, I will vote to support all three resolutions. I also do this to express my hope that the motivation that led to the unease about aspects of our history lead to further consideration, as the Chancellor has encouraged, to the conversations about race on campus. I hope our vote today will essentially move the discussion to understanding our history and students and faculty together moving toward a brighter future for this university. If we do that, that will be the real celebration that we should do as a result of the votes taken today.
Phil, thank you.
I have one comment.
Please.
I just want to comment on, thank you all for your work, and I have, ever since finding the trustee records, which did recognize or note that he was the head of the Klan. I think that was a game changer for many people, because it really does, there was a sense that there was no record of it, and to me that was a clear record, at least from this institution. I want to also comment on the decision and recommendation of changing the name of the building to Carolina Hall, which I think is really wonderful, given the dedication of it to people, really very broadly, who have been oppressed and across the university. I think we've got to do that with the Unsung Heroes Monument. I think this is, and with the plaque and nomination of it, it will be much clearer. And thank you for y'all's work on that. I also like the way that Carolina Hall really embraces and unifies. It's a unifying name. So I also will favor this, and thank you very much for your work.
Any additional discussion, comments? Steve?
First, I also want to reiterate thanks to the board as a general for taking this up, to Alston and to Chuck for the endless work that they put in. This is a really difficult issue. It's a difficult issue for me. I think it's a difficult issue for all of us. For me, I come from a heritage in which your history is very, very important. You are a product of your history. We are all a product of the history of the state. So when this came up, I was very much concerned, and I think as people were very articulate at University Affairs, about the loss of that history. I think the first resolution here satisfies my concern related to losing that history. Part of that history is also a history of persecution. So I'm very sensitive to those issues as it relates here. And I also agree that naming it and honoring a person because he was a member of an organization that engaged in persecution is wrong. And therefore, I too will vote in favor of the resolution.
Houston.
On behalf of all the students that I represent, I just wanted to give a thanks to the board as a whole for really taking up this issue and considering it seriously. I know my fellow students really appreciate that, and I do as well. So just a brief thank you for all the work that Trustee Duckett, Trustee Gardner, and Chairman, that you have put in to make sure that this issue is resolved in the best interest of our students. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, we have Resolution 2 before us. We have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'll call for a show of hands. All in favor of Resolution 2? I count 10. All opposed? I count 3. The resolution passes 10-3. Austin, Resolution 3.
The charter of our institution, as you see on the screen, is clear that our primary mission is the education of our students. As we have studied the issue of Saunders Hall, we realize that we have done an inadequate job of providing education about our campus and our history. The initiatives outlined in the first resolution relating to the teaching of a more accurate and complete history of UNC will take some time. The initiatives relating to the curation of historic buildings and monuments and landscapes will also take some time. We have decided to put a freeze on future renaming of historic buildings, monuments, and memorials and landscapes until we can see the results of our education and curation initiatives. Trustee Duckett, could you read Resolution 3, please?
Resolution number 3, freeze on renaming buildings. The new education and curation initiatives outlined in Resolution 1 will require a period of time to take effect. Therefore, the Board of Trustees hereby declares a 16-year freeze on renaming historical buildings, monuments, memorials, and landscapes.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have any discussion, comments? Kelly?
I just like to say that I feel very strongly that we honor this, and I'm hopeful that faculty and students will allow for this decision to take place and see what comes of this. I mean, we're in a world today that we move quickly, and it's going to be important to allow this education and curation to settle down, come into place, and see what comes of it. And so in our fast-changing world, it's my hope we can continue to. So this is very important to me, this resolution.
Thank you. Anyone else? I would like to make one comment about the 16 years. The thought that went into that length of time, that's 4 full generations of students. That's 8 boards of trustees, generations of trustees. And depending on how long Carol stays, it could be 1 chancellor, or we could be talking multiple chancellors. But the point is that for the curation and the education to root, to actually begin to work, it will take time. And so we wanted to give ample time for that to occur, and that's what's behind the third resolution in the 16 years.
I just want to note that when we first brought this up and discussed it, thought that this was an awfully long period of time. And, but as I've thought about it and we've talked about the generations and the time it's going to take to really understand the history of the university and the buildings and et cetera, that I think that it may take that long. And that doesn't mean that things won't be renamed later after this, but I think the idea of trying to put in place a program where people can understand the fullness of the history over the time period of, from its inception, 221 years ago, is really crucial before you start going around and just renaming the whole campus. As we know, the campus was started in 1789, so it has a significant number of very old and important buildings. So I am comfortable going along with 16 years, given the importance that it is to many of you in making sure that we don't have a slippery slope problem. And I do think that I would encourage that those involved around campus understand the importance. We really are trying to get to and the fullness of this. And I think that people sometimes will think that that there are racist tendencies and we're not seeing the right colors, et cetera. And I think that to some extent we're acknowledging that we can only see the amount that we can see, and it's going to take people who are brighter and more learned than we are to fully explicate this history well, and that's going to take some time. And I think this resolution allows that time to take place in a proper fashion. And so that's why I'm going to support it, but I just wanted to clarify the reason that I wrestled with the time period, but I think it's okay.
Any other discussion, questions? Okay, we have a motion. I'll entertain a second. Second. All in favor, signify by raising your hand. Unanimous. All in favor. Thank you. Chuck, Austin, you guys have spent thousands of hours working on this. So on behalf of our board, thank you for the hard work you did. I can't imagine the phone calls you guys had back and forth. And thank you to all of you in the room that helped with this and in the conversation as well. Do you guys have anything you'd like to say? Hey, well, sorry. Haywood, go ahead with you.
Mr. Chairman, would you please allow me to make some comments to add some context as the representative of those people who voted no on the second resolution but voted yes on resolutions 1 and 3?
Yes.
Thank you. As all of you know, and as we've heard several times, this is a very complicated issue. It's filled with passion. It's been fueled by emotion on both sides. Clearly, it's about more than just a name. It's about our history, our education, the explanation of certain things, and our emphasis on having a safe and welcoming campus. This board has participated in a process. It's been deep, it's been deliberate, it's been inclusive. And we've heard from huge numbers of people on both sides, multiple constituencies, in both a public and a private form of communication. It's been a very educational process, at times both confusing and compelling, but not divisive. I'm proud that we've worked together, not only as a board, but with our broader Carolina community to address such a critical issue. Please remember the 8 very articulate and different presentations during our March committee meeting. They were each compelling in their own right. We listened to all points of view, and those points of view helped to shape our opinions and potential solutions. As with anything that involves a person's system of beliefs, we feel that there is simply not one single right answer to such a complicated set of issues as we're dealing with today. As we look at this set of issues in the past through the lens of 2015, it becomes even more complex. This has led to a spirited yet civil dialogue full of agreements and disagreements, but with respect for the differing opinions that we've all been dealing with. At the end of the process, some of us chose not to focus on a name only, but more fully on our history, good bad, and sometimes very ugly. And combining that with our university's mission to teach our history, to learn from it, to let it show us how far we've come, but also to let us understand how far we need to go. This history is ours. We can't change it. We can't distance ourselves from it, but we must use it as we together address these complex issues and their impact on this great university of the people, both past, present, and future. This is not just about reconciling Carolina's past with its present. It's more about charting a path forward. This is what a governance board does and should do with deliberation and total commitment. Now, each of us who voted no on resolution number 2 accept the decision and pledge 100% support to our chancellor and her team as we go forward with the execution and implementation of all 3 resolutions which have passed. We are unified in that support, and we will go forward together. Thank you.
Haywood, thank you very much. Chuck.
Mr. Chairman, first I'd like to thank everyone involved in this process, and that's a big number of people. I especially want to thank our board, the chancellor, and more than anyone in this process, Alston. I can't tell you the conversations and the calls and the reading and the interviews, and it was all worth it. The goal was to make this university better no matter what came out of the plan. A few points I'd like to make to reinforce as we close the issue are ones that are mainly quotes and thoughts that I've come across that are related to this issue in this research. I would like to state firmly that I feel we've addressed this issue completely and in a way that should help our university. And now it's time to move on to other issues. Also, thought about this a great deal with the passing of a couple of dear friends and mentors, Coach Smith and Coach Guthridge this year. And it would have been great to be able to ask Coach Smith about this issue. And you couldn't, so I did speak with his pastor, Bob Seymour, who's a very neat man about this, and asked him what he thought about it. And he knew Coach Smith as well as anyone. He's the one that got Coach Smith to go with him to integrate Chapel Hill, a very symbolic and important move. And he said something that mattered a great deal. He said, Chuck, the name over the door is not important. Who welcomes you through that door is. We all need to be there to welcome any that come to this university and through that door. Hal Crowther, he's a great writer that I like. He challenges in ways that are unexpected, and he spoke to this very issue over 10 years ago in a fine book called Cathedrals of Kudzu, and I really do encourage all of you to read that book. My favorite line from the book was one that matters a great deal to me, and I think especially students, as you grow, you should take this into account. It is easier and more appropriate to judge ideas than individuals. I think that matters a great deal, and I'm going to say it again. It's easier and more appropriate to judge ideas than individuals. Please take the time to learn history, understand this country and how it's evolved, such things as the Lincoln-Douglas debates, study the Tuskegee experiment, and even the history of forced sterilization for over 50 years in the state of North Carolina. We are imperfect. Good people have done things that are incorrect and wrong, yet we evolve. And finally, I just want to close to say something that's very important to me and I think everybody really believes. This university has evolved a great deal since its inception. We continue to get better, and we are in demand to attend this university for very good reasons. We have more applications and more visits than ever before. We are better now than before, and we are more inclusive than ever. I'm proud of this university and where we're headed. This is a great university.
Thank you. I got literally thousands of emails about this issue from a whole group of people. I'd like to address two specific groups. The first would be those who have suggested that we're rewriting history, and the second one would be to the student activists. So let me address the first group, those who believe that we're rewriting history and that we should leave it alone. Well, I was struck this morning, if you read the Chronicle of Higher Education, there was a headline that said Chinese students in the U.S. seek to expose Tiananmen Square crackdown to their peers back home. That's history. That's old stuff. Why are we messing with that? Well, you see, most Chinese citizens don't know about the violence at Tiananmen Square. That's a pretty ugly chapter of their history. And I would say for those who tell us not to change the history and not to talk about this, we're not changing history. We're not rewriting it. We're shining a bright light on it. We don't like to talk about those unsavory aspects of our history. Things like the systematic exclusion of blacks from virtually every New Deal era social program, from the Federal Housing Authority to the Social Security Administration. A fact that a lot of people don't know. That's part of our real history, not the sanitized history, not the whitewashed history, the real history. Or the enslavement of black prisoners by major corporations, including U.S. Steel, that occurred in Birmingham, Alabama until the mid-'80s. That's a part of our real history that we don't teach. Or the present-day criminal justice system that has in effect created a new Jim Crow. That is a story and a history we need to teach. So for those who say we rewrite history, I say bunk. We're just shining a light on it and telling the whole history. For those, William Bonney was a jolly sea captain, but he was also a violent criminal. So let's separate mythology from fact and from evidence. Let's tell the whole story. To our student activists, congratulations. You deserve congratulations for your perseverance, your doggedness. Now, I hope you direct your passion on more substantial issues. You could, for example, focus on the sorry state of black men on the UNC-Chapel Hill campus. We have difficulty recruiting them, we have difficulty keeping them, we have difficulty graduating them. That's an issue that you can go focus on that will affect real lives today and in the future. If you want another issue to focus on, rather than the naming of buildings, I'd say think about the 800,000 children in North Carolina that go hungry every day. There's a group on this campus in the School of Public Health that focuses on no kids going hungry in North Carolina. There's a place you can go make a real difference in someone's life. So thank you for what you've done on Saunders Hall. I completely support what we've done, but it's now time to move on and make a real difference in the future lives of our citizens. Thank
you. Thank you. I just want to thank the board. As you know, I'm not a voting member, so I can't necessarily vote. I don't get to vote on these issues, but you have been wonderful to include the leadership team, so many people in all these conversations, and I have continued in every one of these to come away feeling so grateful that we have such a principled and demanding board. You know, we take these issues very seriously. People are not willing to make quick decisions. They're really respectful, and it has been a tremendous honor to work with all of you on this, Alston and Chuck, but everybody here putting in so much time, and many people in this room helping in so many ways to really understand these issues. And I really appreciate that, and I know we all appreciate the extent to which you listened and sought out input from students, from faculty, from alumni, from members of the community, both in North Carolina and beyond. That, I think, is a demonstration of how a wonderful university will comport itself. I also really appreciate, Haywood, your point of view. I'm glad that you articulated that because I think it's very important. What I keep hearing, though, is what we all agree on, and that is our educational mission and the determination we have to use what's happened this year in a very positive way. You've given me a bit of a big job, and I really do appreciate it, though. I think it's really important, and I understand why you wanted to be pretty specific that we address this in very important ways. And I speak to the whole university community when I say this, that the things that we're going to be doing, even to address those educational initiatives, are going to take a long time, and they take the involvement of everybody to get those right. And especially when we start moving into expanding our idea about Carolina conversations and thinking about orientation programs and working with Houston and the new student leadership on all the things we can do, this isn't a moment of going quiet. This is actually a moment of great, great involvement. And it will take that same passion to get it right. And it also will go through periods of change. Education changes all the time. So I actually fully support a moratorium on focusing on the naming of buildings so that we can actually direct our attention towards the understanding of history, and even beyond the understanding of history, using our history to build a promising and better future. So I think that's what you've tasked us with. I think that I can speak for the whole leadership team when I say we embrace it, and we're very appreciative for your involvement and really appreciate the actions that you've taken this day. I think throughout this process we've learned very, very valuable lessons already about our university's past, but now it really is the time to live in this particular moment by creating this educational program, these curation activities, and expanded conversations that will honor our traditions of excellence and will be used to enlighten our campus community and make Carolina even stronger in the future. So I appreciate it. I look forward to working with people, and yes, we'll be back pretty soon with some great ideas on how we can move forward on all three of these. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any comments? Phil?
I want to comment in light of the comments by the Chancellor. I strongly support her notion of moving forward, and as a kind of valedictory, urge this in spades. That is, it needs to happen in a very big way. I think the next 10 years in higher education will be a very critical time. If we were to imagine ourselves sitting here in 2025, there will have been some major changes, some losers and some winners in higher education and in economic development. And I think it's important to understand what this university and universities that we love ought to do during that 10-year period. And I have my own list, and I'm sure others have lists as well. But I think the first has to be to imagine what learning should be like in order to move our students to the head of the class. And I don't mean just Carolina students, but that's a big piece of what I'm concerned about. But all of the students in the state, we're not automatically there. We have nothing to rest on as far as the past is concerned, because it won't be enough for the future. The second thing is that I don't know what the number is, but my guess is that at least a quarter and maybe a half of the faculty will need to change in the next 10 years, and there is a competition for talent. Lots of people are out to get the best people, and we have to win that talent war if we are to have the university that we deserve. I think we have to focus on student learning and not just teaching. Teaching is one way of thinking about it, but ultimately the test is what students learn. And then finally, I think we have to consider what it is that we want this university to be known for in the future. And the strategic planning that the Chancellor mentioned, I think, is an opportunity to pick areas where we want to have major impact and to conform all of our systems to make sure that happens. And the last one, point I would add is that we probably need to double our endowment to pay for all of this. That's a big challenge, but the money is out there, and it's on the table, and if we don't grab it, somebody else will. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Anybody else? Okay, well, let me close. Again, Austin and Chuck, thank you for leading this deep dive. Thank you to the entire board. This board could have chosen not to take this on, and we could have kicked the can down the road, but this board chose not to do that. This board chose to take a deep dive and to have lots of conversation, deep conversation, spirited conversation, candid conversation, to tackle this very, very complex and complicated issue. The board committed to a comprehensive solution, and the three resolutions together make the comprehensive solution. It's not Resolution 1, it's not Resolution 2, it's not Resolution 3. It is all three together that represent the comprehensive solution that we're moving forward with. And I think that's important for everyone to remember as we go forward. It's all three of these resolutions. So thank you, and thank you for all your work around this.